Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Pokémon Film Perspectives. Now, apologies in advance if the quality of the video isn't as good as my regular videos. I just got a new tablet and, well, unfortunately the picture quality isn't as good. So, if you can get past it and continue watching, I applaud you, but if you can't, I don't blame you. But regardless, apologies in advance. But anyway, with that out of the way, today we are going to be discussing the second animated film to be released as part of the Pokémon franchise, Pokémon the Movie 2000, aka The Power of One. I don't have a lot of history with this movie. Now, the thing is, when I was a little kid, I loved the first Pokémon movie. I just enjoyed the hell out of it. I loved seeing everything with Mewtwo. I loved the higher stakes. I loved the cool animation. I just thought it was a really damn cool movie. Unfortunately, I might have loved it a little too much because, for me, the only Pokemon movie that was worth a damn were ones with Mewtwo in it. So when I heard that this movie was a thing and that Mewtwo wasn't in it, I did not give a shit about it. In my eyes, this was an imposter Pokemon movie, and thus I didn't want to see it at all. However, I did eventually bear witness to it in some form, as one day while me and my family was sitting down for supper, we had the TV on and we're flipping through the channels, and, well, we happened to come across a channel that was playing this movie. Unfortunately, though, I still didn't get to see it in full, as while I was able to see the beginning, the channel was changed before we could get further in, and while I was able to finish supper and watch the rest of the movie in my own room, I still missed a good chunk of it, as I only managed to get back around the third act, so I wouldn't exactly call that a full viewing. And after that, the closest I came to actually seeing the film and film in and of itself was through a review, and that's not even really seeing the movie, it's just watching people talk about the movie, so basically like this, but on a bigger budget. But I did eventually get to see the film in its entirety when I wound up buying it when I began actively collecting Pokemon movies when I was in college. As such, I was able to form my own opinions on it then, but while I myself may not have the same childhood nostalgia that a lot of other people do, the film did still do really well when it was initially out. It made a lot of money and was considered just as popular as the first Pokemon movie. Although, like the first Pokemon movie, while a lot of people do tend to like this film, they also do notice its blemishes as well. As such, for me, for someone who actively did not watch this movie when I was younger, can I find something to enjoy in it, or is it something that I feel was best left avoided? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. As today we're going to be taking a look at The Power of One and see what the big deal is. And, much like with the last Pokemon movie, this film begins by introducing us to our villain, who in this case is not a Pokemon, but rather some rich douchebag by the name of Lawrence III. And for those of you who have seen the movie, I bet you're wondering why I know his name. I had to look it up. Yeah, for whatever reason that I don't understand, this guy's name is never mentioned once in this movie. Again, like I said, I had to look his name up just to be able to tell you what it was. In the movie itself, it's never mentioned. I think the closest that people have come to actually finding it was through supplemental material, like manga adaptations or something. Regardless, if you went into this film blind and didn't know who the hell this guy was, well, guess what? The film doesn't really do a good job at explaining him beyond rich asshole. So, yeah, his name's Lawrence III. Had to look it up. Whatever. Either way, the film actually opens with Lawrence, so we see him flying in this super high-tech airship to a series of islands in the middle of the ocean. Why? Well, you see, Lawrence has in his possession an ancient tablet which has written on it an ancient prophecy, and the prophecy states that if one ever disturbs the balance of fire, ice, and lightning, they would basically unleash chaos and destruction on the world. And while a guardian will rise up to try and restore balance and stop the chaos, his efforts will end in failure, and ultimately the world will turn to ash. And the only one that can ultimately bring balance to everything is some sort of chosen one. Now, the thing is, Lawrence doesn't really give a shit about the second part of this prophecy. Rather, he's interested in the first parts, the parts that talk about fire, ice, lightning, and this guardian. Why? Well, the thing is, Lawrence is a collector. Of what? Of anything that catches his interest. In his own words later in the movie, he started with a Mew card and just basically built up from that. And, well, why this prophecy is important to him is because he's been able to figure out that the fire, ice, and lightning referenced in the prophecy refer to 3 legendary bird Pokemon by the name of Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos, who actually reside on the islands that he's visiting. Specifically 3 islands called the Fire Island, Ice Island, and Lightning Island. Pretty on the nose, don't you think? But the thing is, while each of those Pokemon in and of themselves would basically fit his needs for his collection as they're rare finds in and of themselves, what Lawrence is the most interested in is this Guardian mentioned in the prophecy, as he has no doubt that this Guardian is another legendary Pokemon by the name of Lugia. And Lawrence believes that if he can stir up enough trouble with the 3 legendary bird Pokemon, then Lugia will make its own appearance, and thus he'll be able to capture Lugia and add him to his collection. So, yeah, his end goal throughout this whole movie is not a lust for power or world domination. It's literally just that he wants to look at shiny shit. Okay. But regardless, he is pretty damn serious about this goal, as he immediately gets to work as his airship zeroes in on Fire Island and begins bombarding the surface with ice missiles, which in turn wakes Moltres up and causes Moltres to attack his airship. Now he is able to capture Moltres as he sends out these big metal rings that exude electricity and eventually capture Moltres in a Faraday cage, which in turn brings the bird Pokemon onto his ship. From there, he sets his sights on their other legendary bird Pokemon, though he knows it's a bit of a waiting game. But in the meantime, though, while he's waiting, the film cuts over to our actual main characters as we see Ash and Co. as they're riding on a ship through the ocean. And yeah, the reason for this is because at this point in the anime, Ash was basically making his way through a series of islands called the Orange Islands. Why? Because he wanted to enter their Pokemon League. At this point in time, Ash had entered the Pokemon League proper, and short end of the point, he lost. He made his way through a few of the brackets, but didn't make it very far before he was taken out. And so now Ash is trying his hand at the Orange Islands Pokemon League called the Orange League. And so that basically entails him to go on another Pokemon journey and find and discover new Pokemon, challenge gym leaders, blah 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 blah. On top of that, Ash's companions are a bit different. While he's still traveling with Misty, Brock's gone. Brock is currently working alongside another Pokemon professor by the name of Professor Ivy, who is a colleague of Professor Oaks, who works at an Orange Island Pokemon lab. But in place of Brock is an artist by the name of Tracy Sketchit, who basically is just traveling with Ash and Co. to try and find new sites to sketch and new Pokemon. So yeah, that's his thing. But regardless, like I said, Ash and Co. are currently riding on a boat, with the captain of the boat being a woman named Marin. And it's basically a nice sunny day that everybody's enjoying themselves, and to try and take in the sunshine, they decide to let their Pokemon out so they can bask in this glory, which leads to the opening title sequence and this film's remix of the Pokemon theme, specifically Pokemon World, which was the theme at the time when they were doing the Orange Island arc. It's a good song, and the remix is okay. Still think I prefer the original Pokemon World, but whatever. But ultimately, Ash and Co. don't get a lot of time to enjoy the sunshine for long, as a storm ends up kicking up, which in turn gets them rained on and causes the sea to get turbulent. As such, while Ash and Co. are able to call their Pokemon back into their Pokeballs, unfortunately, they're still dealing with all this turbulence. And while the rain dies down, the waves basically end up throwing their ship off course, and they end up flying right to an island in the middle of the Orange Islands called Shamoody, which does unfortunately lead to a bit of a rocky landing. Upon arriving, though, they end up meeting with the locals of the island, and while at first they look like your stereotypical savages and so forth, in reality, this is all an act. You see, at the moment, the island is doing a festival called the Legend Festival. And as part of the festival, they put on these weird costumes, basically put on a show for tourists, and they partake in a ceremony wherein a designated chosen one goes out to the islands of fire, ice, and lightning, basically does the ceremony, and then comes back and performs alongside the island maiden, which in this case is a girl by the name of Melody. And immediately I like Melody because she has an attitude on her, and immediately works to try and make Misty jealous by trying to put the moves on Ash, which I find great. I find hilarious. It's fun to see Misty get angry, whatever. Point is, Ash basically is selected as the chosen one of the festival, as once he arrives, he lets slip that he's a Pokemon trainer, and the island denizens claim that a Pokemon trainer is the destined one, that he will bring balance to everything, blah 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 blah. Yeah, they don't really believe all this shit. Basically, the guy in charge of all this just says it's just something they put on for tourists, but they would like it if Ash took part in it, and so Ash does accept it. And as such, while Marin gets to work repairing her ship, Ash and Co. begin looking around the festival, taking in the sights, just seeing all the nice things that the island denizens have done, and which eventually ends with them going to this main hall where they get some dinner and fruit, which is where they see Melody performing in full as the island maiden, resulting with her in a new getup with a veil and everything, and her playing a song on a a flute, ocarina, I don't know. It looks like a seashell, but regardless, she plays the song and proclaims Ash as the Chosen One. And she tells Ash that as part of being the Chosen One, his job is, like I said, to go out to the islands, but because at the islands are these 3 glass orbs that Ash has to collect and bring back to Shamudi, and thus that's where he and Melody will do their performance. Now, while Melody says that encourages Ash to wait till the next day to do this whole thing, because right now they're partying, so he should just enjoy the festivities, well, Ash is Ash, and he's kind of an impatient sort, and he wants to go out there immediately and get this whole Chosen One thing over with. Something that Pikachu seems to be very much in agreement with, as Pikachu ends up taking Ash's hat and pretty much just corrals him to go down to the dock in order to go out to those islands, with Marin volunteering her boat as it's now fixed, and she volunteers to bring Ash out there. However, the waves out beyond Shamudi are still a little turbulent, and so as things continue picking up weather-wise, Melody begins feeling a little guilty for having named Ash the Chosen One, even though I felt it was a group decision with the island denizens, but whatever. And as such, she, Misty, and Tracy decide to try and commandeer their own boat and follow after Ash. And unfortunately for them, they do get some unintended passengers, as guess who should be stalking around but Team Rocket, who was following Ash and Co. when they wound up getting shipwrecked. In this case, they were following them in their own submarine that looked like a Magikarp, because that's what they spend their money on, I guess. And after they learned that Ash's friends were following after him, they basically stowed away on the ship, intending to meet up with Ash and steal his Pikachu once they get the chance. In the meantime, though, it turns out that this weird turbulent weather isn't just affecting the Orange Islands. As we cut over to Pallet Town, as we see Ash's mom, Delia, catch him, as she's just outside gardening with her Mr. Mime, while Professor Oak rides by in his bicycle to just wish her a good day, all is well, and all that crap. Before their bright sunny day suddenly gets a little rained on, as dark clouds come in, and Mr. Mime immediately gets an umbrella to keep Dolly from getting wet. However, the rain doesn't last long, as it stops and turns to snow, much to both adults' confusion. And after the snow clears, well, they suddenly see whole herds of Pokemon fly through, as the sky is kind of completely covered by a bunch of Pidgeys which are flying away, and Professor Oak himself is caught in what looks like a pod, I think that's what the proper term is, a pod of Digletts, which immediately unintentionally steal his bike. So yeah, something's clearly going on in the world, which is further confirmed when Professor Oak and Delia go back to Oak's lab and watch the news, and it turns out there's weird weather going on all over the world, not just in Pallet Town. Something is clearly off, and this is further confirmed when Professor Oak is called by Professor Ivy, who lets him know that whatever's going on seems to be centered in the Orange Island. Something that Delia's a little worried about, because guess what? Her son's out there, and she wants to make sure that he's okay. In the meantime, though, back at the Orange Islands, while Ash and Marin do end up hitting some turbulence because of the storm, they do eventually land on the first island, Fire Island. And as such, while the boat does receive a little minimal damage, it's sustainable, and once they land, Ash and Pikachu end up getting off, or more specifically, Pikachu corrals Ash to go out because Pikachu's been kind of a little antsy throughout the entire first act, and Ash ends up following. In the meantime, Ash's friends arrive as their ship ends up crashing onto the shore as well, although in this case Melody is able to get them off the shore because she ends up unfurling the sails for her boat and uses it to basically get the ship to fly and basically go up a rocky terrain. I think that would ruin the boat, but hey, what do I know? But in the meantime, Team Rocket, upon arriving, do end up leaving the boat and basically try and head Ash off themselves. Ultimately, Pikachu does lead Ash to the center of the island, and at the center of said island is an altar, which the altar has the glass orb that he needs. And what I like is that each glass orb does kind of correlate with whatever island or element it's a part of, as the orb for Fire Island has what looks like a fire energy flowing through it, and once Ash picks it up, it seems to just immediately light up itself. However, before Ash can leave this altar and head back to Marin's ship, Team Rocket arrive at the entrance to this place and try and get their evil motto, but they get interrupted when Ash's friends and Melody arrive and basically crash their ship right at the altar site. It's kind of a mess, I'm not gonna lie. However, However, while Melody tries to take this opportunity to try and poke and tease Misty a bit about being Ash's girlfriend, immediately all that gets put on hold because guess who should show up but Zapdos, who flies onto the scene just unleashing a lightning storm on the area before eventually settling on the altar and just basically spreading his wings and sending out electricity. As such, Pikachu attempts to try and communicate with Zapdos as he's wondering what the hell Zapdos is doing on Fire Island, and with Meowth acting as translator for both Pokemon, we learn that the reason why Zapdos is here is because of Moltres' capture. As with Moltres gone, Zapdos has decided to expand his territory, so to speak, as he wants to claim Fire Island as his own because... I don't know. Looks nice. I don't know. Point is, he's basically being an asshole and wants to take the island for himself because finders keepers, losers weepers. However, Zapdos doesn't get to lay a claim to this island for very long, as guess who should show back up but Lawrence, as his ship flies in and he immediately tries attacking Zapdos. And while Zapdos does its best to try and fight off Lawrence's attacks, eventually they end in failure as more of those weird rings have managed to capture Zapdos, even though they have an electric Faraday cage, and Zapdos is an electric Pokemon, so maybe he should be able to break out, but what do I know? But it turns out that as Zapdos is captured, Lawrence's computers can't seem to tell the difference between a legendary Pokemon and a random group of bystanders, as more rings end up coming down and capturing Ash, Co, and Team Rocket, and pulling them up to the ship as well. As such, while Zapdos is put in his own little display back down in Lawrence's trophy room, unfortunately Ash and his friends are also put in their own cage, with Lawrence's computer letting him know that they got some unintended guests. As such, Lawrence goes down to meet with them, and once again, he basically just talks about how his end goal is to collect these legendary Pokemon, something that everyone is disgusted by, but Lawrence really does not give a shit what they're saying. After all, he just wants to add these Pokemon to his collection, and he doesn't really give a shit about the other consequences. As such, he leaves everyone alone in his trophy room, although he does let them out of the cage, so... that's nice of him, I guess, although maybe stupid in hindsight, as he immediately goes back to his sitting room, as while now he has 2 of the legendary bird Pokemon, there's still a third out there that needs to get got. And with Zapdos and Moltres out of the picture, he knows that the last of these legendary Pokemon, Articuno, is going to make a grab for power as well. And sure enough, as he does, back on Ice Island, we see Articuno beginning to wake up, as Articuno begins basically coating the land in ice. In the meantime, though, as this is all going on, we actually check back in with the rest of the world, and we see that things are getting a lot more hectic as the storm as the weird weather that's been happening all over the world has continued spreading, and we see that it's affecting a lot of Pokemon. Going back to how all the herds of Pokemon that Professor Oak and Delia saw after the weird weather, it turns out that Pokemon everywhere seem to be running to the ocean, and the flying Pokemon are taken to the air, water Pokemon are taken to the sea, while land Pokemon are all just gathering en masse at whatever docks are closest to the Orange Islands. And in the meantime, with all this shit going down, Professor Oak, Professor Ivy, and Delia have commandeered a chopper and are making their way to the Orange Islands. And it turns out Professor Oak has figured out what's going on, with Lawrence basically disturbing the nests of these 3 legendary bird Pokemon. Well, he's sort of thrown the elements out of whack. Not because these Pokemon are just that integral to the very structure of the world, sort of, but you see, there's an underground fissure of a river that runs underneath the islands, and it is maintained by the power of all 3 of these Pokemon being in their respective positions. And as a result, with these Pokemon basically being taken out of their natural habitats and the ones that are left basically trying to lay claim to them, it's basically just causing the streams and currents to go out of whack, which is in turn having an effect on both the ocean and the weather around the world. And if it's allowed to keep going, well, as the prophecy says, it's going to lead to a crap ton of destruction, and a lot of people are going to die. So, yeah, shit's getting real, yo. And yeah, the reason Delia is tagging along with the professors is because, again, worried about her son. In the meantime, as Lawrence, we cut back to Ash and Co. as Lawrence is trying to make a grab at Articuno, and Ash and Co. realize they can't let him get away with this. They need to find a way to free Moltres and Zapdos, and that's what they do, as they end up releasing all their Pokemon and pretty much just order their Pokemon to just unload on the Faraday cages for the legendary birds, with even Team Rocket going along with it because, well, they're kind of stuck on here as well, and this is their best option if they want to survive. As such, eventually they do manage to free Moltres, who in turn ends up freeing Zapdos, only for Zapdos to immediately attack Moltres. It turns out the legendary birds don't want to get along. Although they at least have enough common sense to take their fight outside of Lawrence's air fortress, and, well, they were still a little pissed that Lawrence imprisoned them as they immediately begin unleashing all their attacks on Lawrence's airship, causing the structure to begin falling apart before the asshat can get his hands on Articuno. As such, as a result of things falling apart, Ash and Co. do have to try and make a run for it as they manage to get to an opening, and they manage to basically make a run for it on one of the wings of the airship before that run turns into a slide as it gets too angular. Thankfully, though, they do manage to land on soft ground as Lawrence's airship was actually situated over Lightning Island, and so as it crashes, they end up actually landing near the altar on Lightning Island, which does destroy the altar, unfortunately, but it does end up kicking up the second legendary glass orb, which coincidentally lands in front of Ash, and, well, he has enough brains to pick it up himself and pocket it. In the meantime, though, things are still going to hell, as now the 3 legendary bird Pokemon are now all in the same area, and they are basically now just fighting, since all of them have now been trying to lay claim to vacuums of power. Now that they're all in the same room, the ones that kind of got taken out of the equation are a little pissed with the ones that did want to take their seats, and now it's basically just leading to an all-out brawl between these 3 legendary Pokemon as the elements are thrown out of whack. And while Ash and Co. do try to make a getaway on Melody's boat, which it actually doesn't make sense why it's there, as it was captured alongside them. Unfortunately, enough turbulence is caused that the boat actually does start getting damaged and actually starts getting shaken up. And while Team Rocket themselves try and find cover as they get a little floaty boat from the back of it, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Ash and Co. are going to be making it very far. Thankfully, help arrives as, in the middle of the carnage, something spurts out of the ocean. A big water funnel that actually manages to pick up Melody's boat and bring it to one of the islands in this area. And basically, once the water funnel brings the boat there, it just drops it off on a cliffside near another altar, a much larger one. And upon Ash and Co. arriving in this place, they want to know what the hell's going on, and, well, they're greeted by a Slowking. A talking Slowking, who apparently is situated here for whatever reason. But while Ash does question the fact why Slowking can talk, Slowking doesn't really take the time to explain, as he orders Ash to put his treasures on the altar. And as such, Ash is able to go up, and basically the altar has a spot for all 3 glass orbs, and each of the spots has a little viewing window which aligns with one of the islands. As such, Ash is able to put the glass orbs for the fire and lightning islands in their places, but he's missing the one from the ice island, which means this ritual is not complete yet. As such, Ash and Co. want to know what the hell they can do here, but they don't really have a lot of time to contemplate on that, as, well, help arrives in the form of the Guardian, aka Lugia, who reveals that he was the one that helped the boat get to the island. And while Ash and Co. and he basically tries his best to fight off the legendary birds, but as the prophecy states, while he will try to restore order, his power is not going to be enough. The birds basically outnumber him 3-1, and while he can put up with a lot of their attacks for a while, eventually they're going to overpower him, and things are just going to go from bad to worse. So if they want to try and restore order, then they need the power of the Chosen One. But the thing is, nobody knows who the Chosen One is. All it says in the prophecy is that when Lugia falls, then the world will turn to ash. And at first, everyone thinks, oh, that means that leads to destruction. But no, it turns out it was being literal. When the prophecy says the world will turn to ash, it wasn't meaning that everything would be destroyed. It's that everyone would have to put all their hopes on a guy named Ash. And since there is only one person there with that name, yes, that means it turns out that Ash actually was the literal Chosen One. Which even Ash is actually genuinely shocked by because, well, what's so special about him? He's just a Pokemon trainer, for crying out loud. So he's a little hesitant to take on this role, but he does get some words of encouragement, especially from Lugia, who at one point wound up taking a dive during the battle with the legendary birds, but Melody is able to play the tune that she was playing earlier during the festival, which does reinvigorate Lugia enough for him to get his second wind. But through the power of telepathy, like with Mewtwo, he's able to tell Ash that he is the chosen one and that they do need his help. And while he does tell Ash that he has the choice of not accepting his duties, well, the consequence of not doing it means the end of the fucking world. So, you know, no pressure or anything. But thankfully, with the encouragement of his Pokemon, Ash does decide that, yeah, you know what? He is the chosen one. He can do this. He can do all this crap and blah-bitty-blah-bitty-blah. And as such, Ash decides he needs to make his way to the third island and get the mystical orb of ice. Although that's going to be a bit harder because with the weather being thrown out of whack, the ocean has frozen over and is now ice. And so no boats can travel, so the best he can walk. Thankfully, with the help of his Pokemon and what remains of Melody's ship, he's able to make a makeshift sled and basically try and make his way across the ocean to the ice island. However, as this is going on, guess who should finally show up but the professors and Ash's mom as they arrive in their chopper, which unfortunately ends up crashing in all the weather and mayhem. However, as this is going on, Team Rocket, who's still been there in the sidelines, sees the remains of the chopper and believes that with the combination of their little floaty boats, they may have the means of helping Ash. As while Ash is trying to make his way to the ice island, unfortunately, legendary bird Pokemon are actively trying to halt him and stop his progress. As I guess they like being out of control or something. I don't fucking know. But they do manage to halt his progress enough that he loses his makeshift sled, but it turns out that Team Rocket quickly arrives on the scene as they've jury-rigged the blades from one of the chopper into a makeshift fan, which in turn is blowing their little floaty boat across the ice. And so they end up helping Ash. Why? Well, they may be the bad guys. Well, they kind of need the world to be intact if they want to continue doing bad shit. So it's in their best interest right now to help Ash, regardless of whose side they're on. As such, while they do end up dealing with more problems from the legendary birds, thankfully with the help of Lugia, they are able to make their way to the final island, where Ash is able to get his hands on the final orb. Unfortunately though, that's when the legendary birds try attacking there, and while Ash and Team Rocket do try to make a getaway in their boat again, unfortunately it gets destroyed in the turbulence. Thankfully, Lugia is able to offer aid by offering Ash a ride, with Team Rocket latching onto Lugia's leg as he flies away, though eventually they do have to let themselves go because they realize they're weighing Lugia down, and right now they need to let the twerp, as they call him, get back to the altar so that he can deliver the orb. As such, Ash and Lugia continue flying across, and they are able to succeed. And Lugia's powers plus his maneuverability are able to outmaneuver the legendary Pokemon as they are getting close to the main island. And in the meantime, though, remember all those Pokemon that were coming out to the ocean because of all the weird shit? Well, they finally arrived on the scene, and they're just standing there. Why? Well, according to Lugia, they're here because they sense the danger and want to offer their aid. For what? Well, even they don't know. But they believe that if even one Pokemon can make a difference, then this journey will have been worth it. That sounds stupid, but whatever, let's go with it. However, as Lugia is planning to bring Ash back to the main island, well, guess who should remind us that he's still in this movie but Lawrence. As while his airship has been destroyed, enough of it is still intact that he ends up launching more of those Faraday cage rings at Lugia in an attempt to capture him, because at this point he's not really noticing the fact that the world's going to hell right now. He just wants to get his fucking collection. Thankfully, Lugia is able to break out of the Faraday cage rings via Hyper Beam, which in turn also destroys what's left of Lawrence's ship, but it takes a lot out of him, and as a result, by the time he finally gets out of the rings, he's basically dropped right into the ocean, and unfortunately he doesn't have the energy to keep going, with Ash and Pikachu end up floating up to the surface, and Ash unfortunately falling unconscious thanks to the crash out. Thankfully, though, Misty and Tracy are able to offer their aid as he landed not that far from the main island, and so they're able to pull him out of the water, and while Ash is a little waterlogged, he's ultimately fine, though he is walking with a slight limp. Regardless, he realizes that he needs to get the job done as he manages to limp his way back to the main altar in the island, and he thus once more places the final glass orb in the main altar. And the effect is sort of immediate. They gotta wait a couple seconds, but basically the altar begins lighting up and lets out this weird green water that pools into this that pools around the altar and goes to these pillars. And it's from here where Melody realizes her role in all this as she pulls out her, again, flute, ocarina, whatever, and begins playing the tune from the festival. And sure enough, it ends up lighting up with the pillars, and the energy does manage to do what it's supposed to, as it begins spreading out across the ocean, and the legendary birds, who at this point have all knocked themselves out, or I think Lugia did, I don't remember, but they all hear the tune, and it begins calming the fires in their souls. And in the meantime, this does manage to give Lugia his third wind, I guess, as he manages to rise up from the ocean as well, and yeah, basically doing this basically restores the legendary birds back to their proper mindsets, as they basically all just all unanimously decide, yeah, water under the bridge, right? Let's just go back to doing our thing. As they all fly back to their islands with the balance restored, and thus the world is saved. Lugia ends up releasing this weird giant water funnel. He lets Ash ride on his back once more, and thus, once everything is said and done, he drops Ash back off with everyone else, thanks for her service, and thus he dives back under the water until the day he is needed again. Lawrence III gets no comeuppance as he goes to what's left of his airship and finds the Mew card he started all this with, and decides he's going to start this again, clearly having learned nothing. But ultimately, we do end on a somewhat schmaltzy note, as Ash's mom comes up and chews him out for being in the middle of danger, but that's not because that she's angry at him for, almost dying. Well, actually, she is angry at him for almost dying, because he's her son, and she doesn't want anything bad happening to him, and she basically asks that the next time he needs to save the world, do it closer to home, because she misses him, and I'll give you credit, I'll give that, it's schmaltzy, but I'm okay with it. But regardless, world is saved, Ash did his job, all the Pokemon that came out here and did nothing are all going home safe and sound, and thus as everyone watches the sunset with new eyes and a happy new outlook towards the future, well, we also cut back to Team Rocket as, well, they survived falling off of Lugia. They've been blasted off time and time again. They've survived worse. And they actually lament the fact that they did something genuinely good, but no one will know about it. But Slowking assures them that people did see what they did, and they're watching them right now. And so Team Rocket are like, oh, hell yeah, this is awesome. Are we good guys now? Yeah, that's great. But what if the boss sees it? No, that's bad. Then we'll start our own business. That's good. But we don't have the money for it. That's bad. Well, then we'll steal some. And yeah, they just go right back into their old pattern. So yeah, there you go. That's Pokemon the Movie 2000, The Power of One. And what are my thoughts on this movie? Well, again, much like with the first Pokemon movie, I have two viewpoints regarding this film. The objective viewpoint and the subjective viewpoint. And like with Mewtwo Strikes Back, objectively, this film is stupid. I'm not going to deny that it's not stupid, because it is stupid. The thing is, much like the first film, it definitely goes in expecting you to know what the hell a Pokemon is, which, again, is not entirely a problem. It's a Pokemon fan's Pokemon movie. It's not like, it'd be like if I would, to try and say that you need to be introduced to Pokemon through this movie in order to properly like it, would be as gatekeepy as saying that you have to understand Spider-Man in order to understand Spider-Man 2. No shit. You're going into the movie expecting to know a bit about this franchise already, so I'm willing to give that a pass. No, what I have a main problem with is what is contained in the movie. Now, nothing in this movie is as bad as, say, the no fighting message from the first movie, but it does have its fair share of stupid elements. The first of which, let's talk about Lawrence III. This guy is a dumb villain. Like I said, his entire motivation for causing the problems he does throughout this film aren't because he lusts after power or wants grand control over the world or whatever. He's just an arrogant, rich asshole who wants to add these legendary Pokemon to his collection, and he doesn't give a shit who he hurts in the process. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, got a text. But yeah, like I said, he basically just started everything in this movie just because he wanted the shiny things. And Honestly, there's really nothing that interesting about him. He's just an arrogant, rich, pompous asshole who doesn't give a shit about the consequences of his actions. He just wants the shiny things, and the greater consequence of this movie he doesn't really even give a damn about. All he wants is the legendary Pokemon associated with the prophecy, and that's all he's gonna and that's all he aims for throughout the movie. Okay, admittedly, he is still a major obstacle. Like I said, it's his quest for these Pokemon that set the whole world-ending prophecy in motion, and if it wasn't for the heroes, then the world would have been destroyed. But like I said, that wasn't his end goal. Like, he just wanted to collect things for the sake of collecting things, and admittedly, as a collector, I do kind of get it, but it's very one note of a villain and not that interesting, or not that interesting as a bad guy. Not helped by the fact that come the third act of the movie, he's almost forgotten. Yeah, after Ash and Co. let Moltres and Zapdos out of their cages, he's taken out for most of the third act. His ship is destroyed before he can get his hands on Articuno, and from there, a lot of the major damage that occurs in the movie is a direct result of the legendary birds all fighting for territory with one another, and the resulting chaos that them throwing the elements out of whack is causing. That is the major threat throughout the rest of the film, and from there, the major end goal is to try and put a stop to all of it by getting Ash to get the three legendary orbs back to the main altar on the larger island. That is what's happening here. The only time he does end up becoming a threat again is when he attempts to capture Lugia, as Lugia is bringing Ash back to the main island. Which, at that point, that doesn't feel like he's actively trying to destroy the world. It's just he's an opportunistic dickwad who doesn't really understand what the words time and place mean. It's just kind of annoying. Honestly, as the film goes along, he becomes less of a threat and more of a nuisance. In fact, I dare say he's a nuisance throughout the whole movie. There are larger lasting consequences to his actions, but those consequences were not his end goal. Again, he just wants to collect fancy shit, and he just does not care about other people. So, yeah, I'm gonna kind of consider him a dumb villain. Especially helped by the fact that by the end, he didn't seem to learn a damn thing from his actions. Oh, what's that? I almost destroyed the world? Whatever. Here's that Mew card I started out with. Let's start again. Like, in one ear, out the other, as they say, so what can you do? On top of that, another problem that I do have with this movie is, believe it or not, the whole title, The Power of One. Like, what is that really? What does that even mean? What does that mean? I guess you could argue that it's referring to the power of the Chosen One, but throughout this movie, Ash constantly gets help from others. From Lugia, from his friends, from Team Rocket, from his Pokémon. Ash is not alone in this fight, and it's not the power of one that saves the day, it's the power of everyone. Ultimately, Ash's whole journey throughout this whole film was that he was a fucking delivery boy. I'm not even kidding. His job was to bring these glass orbs back to this larger shrine, and through their power they'd be able to give Lugia, or in this case Melody, the means of soothing the legendary bird Pokemon so that they didn't completely wreck everyone's shit. Which that part's important, but when you constantly say, oh, the power of one Pokemon or the power of one person is enough to try and save the world, it just kind of feels like it goes against everything you're going for, when literally it feels like a team effort from beginning to end is what I'm saying. And they don't even really do a good job at showcasing the whole Chosen One aspect either, because throughout the whole film, so many people get involved in what's going on, and all of them are basically going, well, how can I help? How can I do this? How can I do that? Blah, 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 blah. Whole swarms of fucking Pokemon made their way out to the ocean with the intent of them going, maybe we can help in all this. So clearly there is still something greater but the thing is, I'm gonna give another flaw to the movie for that, because those teams of Pokemon were meant jack and shit. You got a whole army of Pokemon there, and the most they can say is, oh, the Pokemon are here to try and help out, but they don't really know what they can do, so they're just on standby, and they stay on standby throughout the whole thing. Now, you could argue that maybe it's like animals and how they can sense weather patterns and all that crap, but they don't even really go that far. They just say, oh, the Pokemon know they're a danger and they want to help, and yet they don't do anything. They don't do anything. Ash is literally duking it out with legendary Pokemon in this nutball who wants to catch said legendary Pokemon, and they're just kind of on the sidelines going, yeah, that's a thing. So anyway, when can we help? Like, do something, damn it! You came all this way to help out. Why aren't you helping? I don't know. And that also brings me to the final aspect that I don't like about this movie, the Chosen One thing. Why is Ash the Chosen One? What's so special about this kid that makes him the Chosen One? And why is it so important? Like, okay, maybe I'll cut some slack. In the movie, they claim that whoever this Chosen One is the only one that can do the task because the glass orbs located on each of the elemental islands only respond to them, and they need them powered up in order for them to be used for the ritual to calm the legendary birds down. But they still don't explain why Ash has to be that Chosen One. Why is Ash the Chosen One beyond what's said in a prophecy? Why do they treat it as such a big deal? Why do they put so much weight on his shoulders, even though, like I said, a lot of other people are involved in this and a lot of people help out? I don't know why Ash is suddenly the big damn hero beyond the fact that he's the main character. Okay. There could be a possible explanation that is given in a later movie, but that's later on, and I'm gonna forget about it for this one, especially since the Pokemon movies treat continuity like a suggestion. So I'm not gonna get into that quite yet. Regardless, for the movie itself, for them to try and constantly keep pushing this power of one, that Ash is the Chosen One thing, it doesn't really work, and it constantly and they keep trying to overemphasize that Ash is the only one that can do this, even though all they really need Ash to do is potentially just light up the orbs if he's that important. Beyond that, all they have to do is get the orbs to the island, and anybody else could do that. And the fact that everyone's just sitting around doing jack and shit, just twiddling their thumbs while Ash is the one doing all the heavy lifting, feels sad. And to kind of go back to the whole power of one aspect, it feels like it kind of undermines a lot of the things that other characters are doing, like when Team Rocket were to help Ash, or the fact that everyone else has to help Ash out of the frying pan. Throughout the movie, it seems like a team effort, and yet they keep constantly saying, the power of one, only one person can make a difference, and blah, bitty, blah, bitty, blah. Look, I get it. Sometimes the biggest cries can come from the smallest voices, but sometimes it's just like, I feel like that you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot when you're trying to say, oh, one can mean so much when literally the entire film is just a team effort. And anytime Ash tries going about on his own, he kind of gets his ass beat at most chances he gets. So I don't know. I just don't know. It comes across and just feels like it's hammering things in a little too much. And they keep trying to emphasize just how grand and epic everything is. And it doesn't feel epic. It feels kind of silly, kind of dumb, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And by the end of everything, when they're trying to hype everything up with all the Pokemon there that came out to try and help but end up doing nothing, or having Lugia claim that Ash is the mystical Chosen One, even though we don't really see any qualities that should make him the Chosen One, it just kind of falls flat and makes the film feel like it's trying to be bigger, but doesn't really know how to be bigger. It just feels like it's dragging its feet in that regard, and it results in a rather kind of dumb experience. With that said, subjectively, well, like the first movie, I liked this one too. Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, like I said, the film is dumb, but like with the first Pokemon movie, I think I still had a good time watching it. I mean, yeah, by the end of the movie I thought, wow, this was dumb. But I also thought to myself, oh, I'd be happy watching that again. And I would. And again, this is coming from someone who doesn't really have as much nostalgic bias of this movie. Though you could argue I have nostalgic bias of the Pokemon franchise as a whole, but what can you do? But the thing is, even as someone that actively tried to not watch this movie growing up, I can still look at this film and think, yeah, I had a good time. It was dumb, but it was a fun kind of dumb. And it was a fun kind of dumb. It still felt like an experience, an actually fun experience. Yeah, it's nothing too grand or amazing and all that stuff, but I can still easily sit down and watch this movie and have a good time. Like the last movie, it looks cinematic. It looks like the animators definitely had a bigger budget. And like with the last movie, the backgrounds and designs for everything are gorgeous, doing a great mix of CGI and hand-drawn animation. And like with the last movie, they blend them together perfectly, and it leads to a rather beautiful looking movie at many times. The action is still really damn cool, and the thing is, all the legendary Pokemon do have the appropriate grandiosity to them that does make you feel like that these are very powerful forces of nature. When Lugia goes in charging, I think it's awesome. When the legendary bird Pokemon are out just being feral monsters trying to lay claim to each other's territory, it does feel like a grand stakes. And I'd be lying if I said that I found the whole aspect of the weather around the world going out of whack to be at least a little bit enticing. I do like that at least, so I think that's pretty damn cool in that regard. And again, and on top of that, the film still has that standard Pokemon charm to it. Yeah, it still has that standard stupid stuff that you would expect from Pokemon, but the stupid stuff can also be fun. I like seeing Ash just making puns every once in a while, even though puns aren't my soul, but that's a different topic altogether. I like seeing the characters working together. I like seeing the cheesiness. I like seeing them trying to stay together through the power of friendship and all that crap. I like seeing them use their Pokemon in creative ways. There is a lot about these movies. Honestly, when it comes down to it, this film, despite all the things that it has going against it, just has so much going for it too. It has a lot of charm to it. Like I said, it has grander stakes. It feels like a bigger budget Pokemon movie, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't find myself finding some enjoyment in that. Yes, again, when it comes down to it, the film objectively is a mess. It does have its fair share of problems that do keep it from reaching its full potential. But as a Pokemon fan, I can still safely say I enjoyed this movie. It still had plenty of charm. It still looks gorgeous. The animation still looks greater than an anime. The action is still really kick-ass, and it still has that standard Pokemon charm that I think any Pokemon fan will still appreciate. Again, it's not perfect, and if you wanted me to compare this movie to Mewtwo Strikes Back, I think Mewtwo Strikes Back is maybe a little better, but I still think that both films are stupid. I'd still say both films are stupid, but I'd still enjoy. But like I said, both films I still think are enjoyable in their own regards. They may be dumb experiences, but they're fun dumb experiences. And like I said, if you're a fan of Pokemon, I think you'll still enjoy both Mewtwo Strikes Back and this movie. There's still a lot in there to love for any fan of Pokemon, and, well, like I said, you can still poke fun at a lot of the dumber aspects of it, especially if you're an adult watching this from when you were a kid. I still think you would have a fun time. So, on the whole, yeah, like I said, it's not a good movie, but it's still an enjoyable one. And if you're a Pokemon fan, I think you will still find something to enjoy, even if it's just to point and laugh at it. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. So, if you enjoyed the video, thank you. And, well, like I said, I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we actually get to a Pokemon film that has a much more positive reputation, and believe it or not, is one that I genuinely loved when I finally watched it. So next time we meet, we're going to be seeing what happens when Silent Hill is turned into a kids movie with Pokemon 3 the movie, aka Mystery of the Unknown.